Hi, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and the viewer's choice build, the Eduard M4A1 Sherman in 1/35 scale. So, where I left off on the last video was finishing up the photo etch for the tools, which is done and all installed. So, with that out of the way, it's time to move on to the suspension components. Okay, now this is one of those places where you need to pay attention to which marking option you're using. So for my particular version, marking D, I will be using the spoke type wheels as opposed to the solid wheels. So what I need to do first is I need to take care of this mold parting seam here and make it nice and smooth. And this is the way I do it. Now my camera angle isn't the best to see exactly what I'm doing, but it's pretty basic. Really all I do is I take the wheel, a piece of sandpaper, and I just rotate it as I run it on the sandpaper, and it takes care of that seam line. Now I'm using 220B grit, wet or dry? Dry, not wet. And swiping those off. Now you can do it another step and do it on some finer to smooth it out even more, but I've found once primer and paint gets on here, you're not going to notice any sanding marks, which are very, very, very faint. And weathering is going to take care of it even more. So I find this particular grit works pretty well for doing seam lines on wheels. Okay, and there you go, all nice and cleaned up. So after that, I take a one of my ultimate modeling products, sanding sponges, and I just kind of run it along the edge to get rid of any remaining burr along this edge from the sanding process. That way whenever you get to paint and weathering, you don't have this weird little fuzzy spot along the edge. Alright, next I got the wheels all sanded down, and I went and rinsed them off through some running water just to make sure there's no dust stuck to them, so they won't be all nasty when I paint them. So the next part is the drive sprockets, and for my version I need to use parts A3 and A4, and then I'll also need P2, which is poly sleeve type thing for the axle. So I need two P2s, which are these here. So I need two of those. And tip of the day number one, always save these extras, because you will run into a point where you're going to lose one on another kit down the road, and this way you have extras. So anyway, back to the drive sprockets. Now they've got the connection points, the sprue gate was right here, so it's like, oh, how do I clean that out? Well, the nice thing is it's the type that is attached to the back, so you should be able to, if you cut them really close, get the majority of it off, if not all of it. So the little bit of residual that's left will be super easy to clean with just a simple swipe of your blade, a nice sharp blade like that. And like that. So it's all nice and clean. Alright, next is cutting out B3 and B5 and cementing those in place. And I leave the wheels to spin. I don't think it's really necessary. It says, it doesn't really specify in the instructions, but I don't put any cement on this end just because whenever I paint the wheels, I like for them to be able to spin. So there's that, which is B3 and B5, and then there's also B4 and B6, which for the opposite sides. So the next part, I'm going to go ahead and cut out these parts right here. Now this comes in the little bag with the poly sleeves, and they're to be cut 4.5 millimeters by 11 millimeters. And what these are is they're cushions that go inside of here where the suspension is, where the vertical volute springs are, and it allows the suspension to work. Now I guess that might be cool if you're doing a diorama or whatever, but you know, I don't know, it might be helpful, but some of these kits come with actual solid pieces of plastic sprue, or plastic that's already on the sprues that are already that size, and you put those in there instead in order to make them solid. But this kit doesn't have it, so I'm gonna have to cut these parts out. It'll just be a matter of measuring them and cutting them to size. Okay, all the parts are fairly easy to get cleaned up. So according to the instructions, let's see if I can scoot it over here so you can see, we need, in this case, I'll be doing B19 and B21, which are the main bogey castings. And I'm not going to worry about cleaning those up too much right now, because the only part that needs to be cleaned up is the top, and those I'm going to be doing after they're assembled. Then I also need parts B9. We need 2 of those. Then we need B14, which is the return roller. Then let's see, I already cut it off, but it is B15, B16, in this case B16, the return attract skids for the top. And that is all. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot the spring assembly. And then we need the 3 rubber cushions that I cut out from the last little segment there. So just basically, and they don't have to be like super exact. They do have to be, you know, fairly close, but as you can see, you know, they're not quite exact, but there hasn't been any problems with any of these putting them together. Let's see, seems like nope, that's everything. So what I like to do is I like to use the back, the part that attaches to the hull itself, as the base piece, and that's just because on these return rollers there's a faint seam line along the back from the mold being separated. I just like to rub that down just a little bit, but I like having that part at the back. So that will go there. Then you need to make sure that you have these going the right direction. As you can see, there's kind of a little bit of an angle that needs to face inside to give clearance for the wheels. Okay, and it just goes onto the spring assembly like that. cut this a little bit of sprue off here. This isn't really necessary because it's going up into that foam, but I do it anyway. Okay, then you know what? Hang tight. I'm going to change my camera angle so you can actually see what's going on a little better. Okay, with the 3 pads in place, the arms on the spring assembly, I'm going to try and carefully hold this so you can see what I'm doing. The pin sticking through the arm needs to fit in that oval slot. So it's just a matter of putting that one there, holding it level. There may be other ways to do this. This is the way I found it worked, and it worked like a champ. On the other ones, this one's being mean. Okay, and if those pins aren't quite in the slot, just using the arms, slide it till it clicks into place. Then putting the arms in, these swing, I'll call them a swing arm with the wheel, they'll only fit one way because there's a small pin and a large pin. Okay, now you theoretically could get it upside down, but you don't want to do that. The sharp angle faces down, the curve faces up, because they kind of interlock together once they're in position. Let's put that in place there and there. And if you're lucky, the spring assembly inside won't pop out of those deals, but if they do, it's no big deal, because just using these arms again, you can just pop it back into place. And then this one goes here. It's really hard doing this on video, guys. I'm trying to see around my camera and all that stuff. See, and if you have it too far down like that, it's going to hang up. So you need to pop it out, swing it up, and then get, there we go. All right, just like that. Everything is workable. Okay, then I'm going to take a clamp of some kind, or you know, however you want to do it, but I like using these clamps. That's what I'll use to hold it together. So before I get it all pinched together, I'm going to apply some cement, apply a little bit on this side here so it'll ooze out right there, apply a little bit right there, and then a bunch in that big slot in the middle, just like that. Then when you squeeze it together with the clamp, hold it in place really nicely like that. Then just set it aside so it can dry up really good. Then I can come back and sand it. Alright, so all these steps I have finished. So the next thing to do is some cleanup and a little bit of extra detailing. So here's what I got going on here. Here is one of the bogies completed, pre-cleanup. So what I do with these is I take my gray and black sander, which I don't use that often, make sure I got a nice fresh end on it, and then I sand the top like that till I get the sprue gate burrs cleaned off and that center seam cleaned up. Now if the sprue there is too big, then just scrape it off the knife and then continue sanding thusly. Okay, so it gets that nice and smooth. Then right here for this seam, I use the flat edge of my blade, my preferred method for doing stuff like this. And I do it 2 different directions, that way it kind of seems to keep it a little more even. And if you'll know from my other videos, you can tell when you're getting it nice and flat. See, this is still shiny here. This is dull. Still needs some more in order to get it perfectly flat, because this part on the real deal was flat. And then scrape the edge to get any burring off. Okay, and we have that. So then after that, one thing I need to do is, on the real deal, there are 4 bolt holes, 2 on each side. One pretty much centered in the corner, kind of like right there where the tip of my blade is. The other one not quite halfway, a little bit higher than the halfway point, at least from the photos I have online. So there's 4 bolt holes, and those are, so this part here could be mounted on either side. One of the benefits of the Sherman suspension system, other than being robust and easily repairable, these bogies, these cast bogie sections here were not specific to the side. This determined which side they were on, and it could be flip-flopped from side to side depending on what they needed. So what I did after I got it smooth is, using a pencil, after I got it smooth like this, using a pencil, I just drew freehand a grid across where I want the let me illustrate for you. Just draw, not super precise, but if you can draw a halfway straight line, you're okay. And I can generally draw halfway straight lines straight across there. And then just slightly above the halfway point. You don't want it equidistant top and bottom, okay? So then you end up with that. Then after that, starting with this hole here, I just put my, I could use a pin vise, and if you want to use a pin vise, that's cool. I prefer, for something like this, I kind of like using the knife, and I'll show you why. Stick it right at that intersection of the 2 lines, and then just spin it around. This is an old school way of drilling holes. I learned this from one of Shepard Payne's Kalmbach books. So then, using the blade and the upper hole, I can make sure it's lined up because the blade is straight. And then do the next hole. And you do that all the way around. And you end up with that. Nice 4 holes. A little bit of extra detail that for some reason manufacturers don't include and is often overlooked, and I generally don't even do it, but I figured I would on this kit. Since it's got all the photo etch and stuff, I figured, hey, I'll do that. Once you do that, then you can glue the track skids on the top, and you have a completed bogie system. So I'm going to finish those up, then we'll move on to the next page. Okay, so all the bogies are complete, and the next step is to attach all of the running gear components to the hull. However, and this headlight, or no, that's a horn, siren, whatever you want to call it. So that and the running gear. However, I'm not going to do all the running gear. I am going to do the final drive covers. Do those, and I'll do the siren. But that's it, because I'm going to leave, because of the paint job, I'm going to leave the I'm going to leave the bogies and the drive sprockets and the idlers off until after painting. So what I'll be doing is once I get to the point of painting, I will be masking these portions off here where the cement will go, and the back of here as well, so I'll get a good bond. But because of the paint job I'm doing with that swirly white business underneath, I'm gonna leave that off until I get that part painted. So let me go ahead and do these final drive covers. Whoa, which fit really nicely. So for this one, I don't want too much glue seeping around the edge, so I'm going to use this cement this time, just on the inside edges and the locating pin points. Just very little, because I don't want too much, I don't want any oozing out. And just like that. It's one of those cases where different cements are handy. And then we'll do this one here. Okay, that fits okay. Always test fitting. And thanks to some of my European viewers, I asked a question on my last kit if the Revell Contacta, or whatever it's called, was similar to this Testors liquid cement that's actually kind of a little thicker than most liquid cements, and apparently it is, so that's kind of good to know. Seems to be really popular over there in England and the European continent, and if it's anything like this stuff, I can see why, because it does work really well. So I got that. So now I just need to get parts J11 and J10. Okay, so here are the two pieces together, and there is an upper and a lower. Maybe you can see. But there's kind of a V-shaped mark in here. The point of the V goes to the bottom. All right, and then it just goes on the fender right about there. So I'm going to carefully and you'll want to make sure that is nice and flat on the bottom, because that's where it connects to the sprue. If you don't, it's going to be hard to get it flat and give you a positive connection, so make sure it's really flat. And then taking the tweezers like this, check it out. Yeah, that looks good right there. I am not sure. Let me do so. I'm going to check something real quick. Okay, did a little bit of research, and it looks like on this particular vehicle that the siren would be back here, more right here than out here. So right there, that looks jolly. So that's where it's going. So I'm gonna get a little bit of this here cement, put it right there, put it right there like that. Just beautiful. I'm stoked. Got it the first time. All right, so that concludes the lower hull, or the hull actually, lower and upper. So with that, I am going to call this video quits before it gets too long. And next time we come back, we'll start on the gun. Start assembling the gun. And obviously, moving on to the turret parts. So, thanks for watching Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and the viewer's choice, Eduard M4A1. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, hints, tips, or any of the other such stuff, put them in the comments below. So until next time, I will see you all later.